In this video, we're going to talk about composition. Composition is when we use an object that contains other objects. So let's take a look at this example, and we'll try to go through this. It involves several classes. So I am creating a car. So this is going to be a car class. And what kind of things do we want to keep track of about a car? Well, a car has a make and it has a model. Maybe Chevy Cavalier would be the make and the model. That's great. Cars also have a type. Is it a sedan? Is it a hatchback? So let's take a look at this car type real quickly. Notice this isn't a string. I could have made this string. I could have said private string type. And I could have said that the user can type in whatever they want. Sedan, hatchback, SUV, whatever they wanted to do. But I wanted to limit it so that whoever uses this class can only type specific types of cars to make sure they always match what we as the designers want it to be. So I created an enum. So let's go look at the car type. Okay, so this is not a class. This is an enum, okay, which is very similar to a class in how it's created, but it only creates basically a list of choices. So let's look at car type. I have this car type enum up here, and it looks like a class when we declare it, except instead of the word class, it just says enum. And inside its code block, we just have a list, and by convention, we capitalize all the different possibilities. So any car type that I want somebody to be able to use, I can put inside this car type enum. So they can do a sedan, they can do a coupe, they can do a hatchback. If I want, I can add SUV, and it will become a valid type. And they're separated by commas. Okay, so there's my car type enum. So let's go back to my car class. I can set the make and model. Really, if I wanted to, I could go back and make an enum for all the different makes, Chevy, Ford, Toyota. Okay, I could also do the same thing for all their models, and I could list all the different models that are made by Chevy and Ford and Toyota. That'd get pretty extensive, but I would make sure people couldn't actually type something in incorrectly. They couldn't spell Chevy with an I by accident. But I did that for car type. I used an enum here. But motor is another class. Okay, so a car contains a motor. A car has to have a motor. Well, the motor has a lot of details about it. So to just put motor here as a string, I could put a string that describes the motor, but a motor has a lot of components itself. So we created a class called motor. So let's go look at the motor class. Okay, so the motor has some things. It has a number of cylinders and it has a displacement. Okay, so it could be like a 4-cylinder with a 1.6 liter displacement, for example. So we have two private fields that keep track of the number of cylinders and how big the engine is. That's its displacement. We have a constructor for the motor. That when somebody creates a motor, they have to tell it how many cylinders and how big the displacement is. We have the getters and setters for cylinders, getters and setters for displacement. And we have a toString that tells us information about the motor. So this is a class. To create a car, we have to supply it with a motor. That just kind of makes sense, doesn't it? What else does a car have to have? Well, it has to have wheels. Okay, a car has to have wheels. And it has to have more than one wheel, so we made an array of wheels here is what I did. So we have to, when we create our car, we have to tell what kind of wheels the car has. So we have a class for that. So let's look at this. For wheels, we have a rim size, and we also have a tire type. And if you notice, tire type is right here. Tire type is another enum. So for tire type, we can pick radial, snow, or bias ply. Okay, when we create a wheel, we can tell what kind of tires are on the wheel. Okay, so how big is the wheel and what kind of tires does it have on it? So we have a constructor that lets us set those. We have getters and setters for rim size and tire type, and we have a 2-string. Standard class construction here, nothing surprising. Okay. Go back to our car class. So our car is going to have a make, model, we're going to set its type, we have to provide it with a motor, and we have to provide it with wheels. When you create a car, here's the constructor. I have to supply the make as a string, the model as a string. I have to supply the car type as a car type. That was that enum that we used. I have to supply a motor object. Okay, so I have to supply a motor that's going to be stored in this parameter, and it's going to be of type motor. So I have to give the car an object of type motor. I also have to give the car an array of wheels. Okay, now we could expand car. You know, there's lots of elements in a car. We could do seats. We could do steering wheels. We could do radios. We could create all the different objects that make up a car. And in fact, when I create a motor, I could make a whole bunch of things, piston size, engine block, engine head, type of valves. I could do all kinds of things, but we're simplifying this a little bit. But I want you to see that a car is made up of some other objects. In this case, it's made up of motors and wheels. That's all we're putting in here. I also wanted to show you how to use an enum. So when I make my car, I give it a make, model, I tell what type of car it is, I have to supply it with a motor, and I have to supply it with an array of wheels. Okay. All right, so we have a getter and setter for get make, getter and setter for get model, getter and setter for get type, a get motor and a set motor, and a get wheels and set wheels. And we have a 2-string that gets a little bit more complicated than what we're probably used to. I used a string builder, which we're going to learn about later in this chapter. A string builder is a nice class that comes with Java. Strings are objects and they're immutable. String builders are not immutable. So when you're concatenating things onto a string a lot, it pays to use a string builder because it has an append method. So what am I doing? For each one of the wheels, I'm appending the 2-string for the wheel. So I just used a W here, but remember, anytime we use that as a string, it'll automatically run the 2-string of the wheel class. So it'll run this 2-string right here. Okay. And then I am returning the make, the model, the type, the motor, and then that wheel string. So I needed to do this because depending on how many wheels my car has, hopefully yours has 4. I didn't write anything in here to limit a car to 4 wheels, so I guess we could make one with 3 wheels. I guess we could do one with 8 wheels if we wanted. So it will print out information about the motor and about each individual wheel. All right. So a car requires all these things. Its 2-string gives us all the information to print it out. Let's actually see how I use this car class. Okay. So over here, before we can make a car, we have to make the motor and the wheels that go on the car. That's kind of true in the real world too, right? One plant makes the wheels, GM and Defiance makes the engine block, another company probably makes a steering wheel, and some AC Delco makes the radio for a GM car. So all the components have to be made first. Notice that word component. The components have to be made first in order to do the composition, and that's what we're talking about is composition. So I created a motor. by running the new motor. I had to tell how many cylinders and what its displacement is. So it's a 4-cylinder with a 1.6 liter displacement. Okay. I had to create an array of wheels. Okay. So I created a wheel, a 16-inch wheel with a radial tire on it. Okay. So tire types, radials was one of my choices. I could have done snow or bias ply. There's other kinds of tires too. So I could have done one as a snow tire. That would be really weird, right? That works fine. What if I did a plastic tire? Plastic. Oh, it won't work. Okay, because it can't find the symbol, because that enum doesn't have a plastic tire type in it. So that's the benefit of not using just a string and using an enum. Or I spell radial wrong. Okay, I get an error. So when somebody's trying to make a radial tire, they have to spell it correctly. Another benefit of using an enum. Okay, so 4 wheels that are stored in this My Car Wheels, which is an array of wheels. Okay, so I created the motor and I created the 4 wheels that go on the car. And now I can create my new car. I can supply it with, let's use a capital F there. I can supply it with a make and a model. So it's a Ford Escort, if you remember those. The car type is sedan. Actually, I think those were hatchbacks. It doesn't really matter. We're not car experts here. We're programming experts. Ford Escort, its car type is a sedan. And then I supplied it with the motor that I created, the motor object. So my car object, called My Car, is going to contain a motor object. That's composition. It's also going to have 4 wheels because they're stored in this array of wheels. Okay, and an array is an object and wheels are objects. So we have composition. A car is made up of its individual parts. So I created my car, and then I'm just going to print out what my car looks like. So print line My Car. Remember, it's going to run the 2-string for car when I do that. And it's going to run this code that I talked about a little bit ago. Construct a string that describes all the wheels. Then it's going to print out the make, then the model, the type, the motor, and then that wheel string that I did up there, which should contain all 4 wheels. Okay. So let's run it. And this is what we get. So the make equals Ford, model's Escort, type equals sedan. The motor is a 4-cylinder, 1.6 displacement. And then I see wheels is equal to, I probably should change how that prints out, but it's all right. Wheel with a rim size of 6, tire type radial, and it does that for each of the 4 wheels. And we can see that my car is composed of motors and wheels. And if we want to get even more detail, we can add all the other parts of a car, but that's composition. When an object contains a variable or a field, well, let me open my car class again. When an object contains a variable or field that stores another object, that is composition. And this car is composed of a motor and wheels.